Hello, my name is Scott Ellsworth. I'm a writer and a historian who lives in Ann Arbor, where I also teach at the University of Michigan. But I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a town that had a dirty little secret, actually a dirty big secret that wasn't talked about for years and years and years. And that secret was the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, which was the worst single incident of racial violence in all of American history. In less than 16 hours, more than 1,000 African American homes and businesses were looted and burned to the ground by a white mob that included members of local law enforcement in Tulsa. Hundreds of people received medical attention. But to this day, we don't know how many people died in the massacre. I think reasonable estimates go from somewhere in the 70s to as high as 300, but we don't know what that number is. But remarkably, even as large as this event was, it was also very much suppressed and buried for more than 50 years. Newspaper accounts were cut out, official records were destroyed. People had their lives threatened for wanting to learn about this story and to tell this story. By the time I was growing up in Tulsa in the 1960s, the story started to loosen up a bit. And I was very fortunate as a child to have heard little bits and pieces here and there. And when I was 21 years old and a rising college senior at a school out in Portland, Oregon, I decided to write my senior thesis about the massacre. And that's really where I began. So for the last 45 years, I've been involved with writing about the massacre, helping to research it, starting the search for the unmarked mass graves, the massacre victims. I wrote a new book this last year, The Groundbreaking, which talks about the massacre and also about how it was covered up. But the one point I'd like to make here that I think is really vital is that the history of this horrific event was kept alive by a very courageous group of massacre survivors and white observers, some of whom were threatened for what they knew, who kept this story alive decade after decade. And I was very fortunate. It didn't have to be me, it just turned out to be me, that I got to meet many of these people in the 1970s when they were quite elderly. And even though none of them had ever done interviews before, they shared their story with me, and that was really, and eventually the world, and that was really the reason that we know why this story happened. One tragedy about Tulsa is that there are buried secrets in almost every community in the world, almost every community in the United States. So when you look at your history, wherever you may be living, I would keep an open mind and realize that many of the stories have never been told.